Alright, this is going to be the last major instructional portion of the IUPAC course. So at this time I'm just going to bring up as a reminder, if you would like the workbook that accompanies this IUPAC course, you can check the link in the description below for any of these IUPAC videos, and you will see the link that leads to the workbook. So that's a workbook that I've put together so that you can have a set of notes and a set of instructions that will basically overview everything that we've talked about with this IUPAC course. And importantly, it helps to support the channel. So I'm offering these courses for free to all organic chemistry students, and it really helps me with my production value and being able to sustain doing this if you guys support the channel. So I would encourage you to pick up the workbook if you have the time and the money to do so. And you can also purchase the additional work session where I will be going over a large number of naming exercises, and you will get a lot of practice with that. Now I will still offer a free session at the end of this course, and that will go over some of the basic types of questions, but if you want a more in-depth, higher level practice, then you can also purchase that practice session. So we are going to finish up here in naming with functional groups. Now, functional groups are groupings of atoms that have specific chemical or reactivity properties. And when I'm talking about this, you're going to be thinking about things like alcohols, ketones, carboxylic acids. So when you see these little grouping of atoms that you commonly come across in organic chemistry called a functional group, those are going to have special ways of being named. So you will change the suffix of the parent name, and then you'll give priority to the functional group that you are looking at. So, for instance, if we have an alcohol, instead of ethane, it becomes ethanol because alcohols end in OL. So I keep the same parent name, right, the F, but then when I go to name ethane, I drop the ane and I add OL, and that would be for an alcohol. So let's take a look at this. And just as a disclaimer, while I'm going to discuss this here, we go into specific examples of each functional group in the course for that functional group. So for instance, let's say you really want some practice naming ketones. You should go to the ketone and aldehyde course, because at that point we will have a entire dedicated section to naming aldehydes and ketones, and you'll get a lot more experience there than you're going to here. This is just an overview of how to handle functional groups when you're naming compounds. All right. So here are the list of major functional groups, and then the suffix naming that you would change if you were to come across that functional group. Now it's very important that when you see a functional group, you have to prioritize the functional group and give that the lowest possible number that you can. It always gets the priority. So, for instance, let me draw this up here. Okay. If I had a ketone, let's say something like this, right? And right here, this is where the ketone lies in position 2, right here. Okay. If I have, let's say, a chlorine somewhere else, or I have some other type of functional group, I always make sure. So here's an example where there's a chlorine on this side, right? So if it's same forwards and backwards, I give priority to the functional group. And even if it wasn't, the functional group always gets priority when it's present. So you go 1, 2, and then you continue naming that way. So this would be a 2, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this would be a 2-heptone if I were naming it, because one is the way that we name ketones. So here are all the different functional groups. A carboxylic acid will be named with oic acid. So that's something that would look like this with the OH. And then you have esters, similar in nature, except they have an OR. Remember, R just stands for some sort of alkyl group. It means rest of the molecule. The acid chlorides will end in ol chloride, and then that would be a C double bond O Cl. Keeping in mind that on the other side of this are all R's, okay, so this is R, R, etc. So I'm just drawing the actual functionality here. The amide would be C double bond O, and then it could be an an N with an R or an N with an H. Okay, it could be one of those. The nitrile is a C triple bond N. Some people discuss that as a cyano type of functional group. Okay, the aldehyde is an Al, and that's not what I meant to put. I need to put the actual functional group there. It would be a C double bond O H. The ketone would be a C double bond O with an R. An alcohol is an OH group. A thiol is an SH group. An amine is an N, and it could be an R or an H. Right? And then alkenes are going to have carbon-carbon double bonds. Alkynes are going to have carbon-carbon triple bonds. So you can see all of the different endings here. Ketone is -one, alcohol -al, thiol, amine. The alkene and the alkyne are -ene and -ine. So you would prioritize the first portion of the double bond or the triple bond depending on which way you're numbering. Now, groups that are ranked below alkanes. So we've been focused on alkanes this entire time. There are a couple functional groups that are ranked below alkanes with naming, and so therefore you would still name the compound as an alkane, and then these would just be substituents here. And that would be an ether. So ethers are named alkoxy, so you're going to see examples that say things like methoxy, ethoxy, and so on. So with something like that, it's going to be an OR group. Okay. The fluoro, we know, is an F. We've seen some of these examples as we've gone along. The chloro is a Cl, bromo is a Br. The iodine, it's iodo, and then a nitro group is an NO2 group. All right. Now, one other thing that I did want to mention is that this list up here is in descending priority as you go down. So in other words, this carboxylic acid group is going to have the highest priority, and then as you go down you get to the lowest priority for functional groups. And then the table that we just looked at below that is even lower, right? So we would have alkanes at an even lower priority than alkynes, and then these would continue to go down in terms of low priority, with a nitro group being the lowest priority of the bunch. So why is that important? It's important because if I were to have two functional groups that were sort of battling one another, so to speak, right? So let's say that I had, I'm going to draw a similar example sort of to what I had earlier. But let's say I have an OH here, right? And then I also have a ketone right here, okay? So the question is, which functional group takes priority? Is it going to be that I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right, with the naming? Or is it going to be that I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 right here? So if you take a look at this, it would be a 2-5 versus a 3-6. Now most of the time you would say, oh, a 2-5 is going to win no matter what. Of course that makes sense. But when we bring in functional groups, it's a little bit different because we prioritize based on this chart right here. So we go in and we say, here's a ketone, here's an alcohol. Which one holds higher priority? The ketone does. So that means the ketone needs the lower number of the two. So when I come here, I say 1, 2, 3. The ketone as a 3 has a better priority than the ketone as a 5. And so this then would become a 3-heptone, and in front of it would be a 6-hydroxyl, because in this case the alcohol is not going to be the root name, the ketone is, because it has higher priority. So you have to balance and weigh the functional groups as they present themselves, okay, and you will prioritize that based on this list up here, as you have multiple functional groups. So again, we will look at examples in detail for each of these when we get to the respective chapters. So you will want to keep an eye open for those courses, and you can go to those courses and learn those naming techniques when we get to them. So other than that, that pretty much wraps up what we're going to talk about with the functional group priority naming. So I will see everybody for the practice video if you head over there and want some more practice. Otherwise, thank you very much for tuning in to the Chem Complete IUPAC course, and I look forward to teaching you more in the future.